First of all, I extend my heartiest, gratitude to the organizers for inviting me to this conference. In fact, this is not the first I've attended. I have attended a couple before. It's a pleasure to come to Beijing time and again, which I consider my second hometown. Well, my topic, China's global rebalancing, of course, civilizational rebalancing is also that, and India's options. I would restrict myself to less than 15 minutes, I hope, and I would flag 4 things. The first, why the global rebalancing? And second, do we need to claim the ancient connectivity routes or links? And the third, should we draw parallels between these old and new routes? And finally, India's option, where India stands. So while coming to the first part of my presentation, I think when we are rebalancing our bilateral relationships, it's extremely important to know, the need for global rebalancing. In fact, what I'm presenting are some of, the points I have highlighted in my forthcoming edited volume. In fact, the volume is titled China's Global Rebalancing and the New Silk Road. Shortly to be published by Springer. Hopefully next month it would be out. But pleasantly, the Chinese edition is already out. It is titled 重返全球与新丝绸之路. I think there are a couple of reasons I have identified. First, as usual, the financial crisis in the West and the European debt crisis. In the morning, I was listening to some of the speakers in a global governance session. Margarita, so she formulated the word. She said that Europe is on strategic holiday. So I think strategic holiday could also be considered one of the reasons for this global rebalancing by China. And more importantly, I think there is disequilibrium and asymmetries in world economic system, which is pointed out by scholars and analysts so quite often. So for example, so if we see the consumption by 4% of world population, that is United States, it is larger than what is China's entire GDP today. But of course, I'm not talking about 2017 GDP, 2016 GDP. Around 11 trillion US dollars. And if you put together India and China, which constitute 40% of the world population, so they consume a little more than what is India's entire GDP today. That is around 2.6 trillion US dollars. So these are the appalling asymmetries which we have across the globe. But can China offset these asymmetries alone? I think no. And that is why the global rebalancing is important. And rightly so. So more than 100 countries, they are on board. And importantly, I think most of them, so they are the developing countries, emerging countries, and there is a scope for economic development, and there are a lot of complementarities, given China's expertise in last 35 years or so. And recently, as we have seen the Western retrenchment, especially Trump pulling out of the global governance institutions of global governance. This, I think, is also seen necessary, in this part of the world for global rebalancing, and that's why these new institutions of global governance are being created. Of course, China doesn't say that, so we are replacing the existing mechanisms, but we are substituting or replenishing the existing structure of global governance. And as far as civilizational rebalancing is concerned, I believe both India and China say they were important and major players during ancient times. And if we go back to the records, historical records, right from Sima Qian's Shiqi, Pangu's Hanshu, and all up to Tang Dynasty and even Ming, Zheng He's voyages, we find a lot of connectivity, between India and China, of course, again, with the rest of the countries in the region. But here again, I think the narrative, which is there, and my Chinese friends, so they would like to portray some of these voyages, especially during Zheng He's time, as peaceful, but I think I would rather take them with a pinch of salt. There were regime changes during Zheng He's time. The decapitation of Chen Zunyi, of Srivijaya, in a public lair in Nanjing, and regime change in Sri Lanka. And I mean, not only during Zheng He's time, but even before that, during Tang Dynasty, in India itself, when Wang Xuanci, so he goes there and then with the help of Nepalese and Tibetan armies, defeats the local king and brings his entire family to China. I mean, these are instances I think we need to be careful. And that is why it is important to reevaluate these contexts. But having said that, I do not deny the fact that these facilitated trade and connectivity, and I think the new route, they should be taken in this light, especially the Silk Road spirit, which President Xi Jinping has been talking about in his speeches and also reiterated during recent 19th Party Congress, which is that of peace and cooperation, openness and inclusiveness, mutual learning and mutual benefits. But even the narratives of Zheng He, even if they are problematic, but I think one thing we have to accept, that even if the large armadas of Zheng He, they were capable of capturing territories, expanding Chinese sphere of influence, but they really didn't capture any territory. That is also the truth which we need to accept. Now, whether we should claim these roots or not, but I think yes and no together. As far as yes, they provide us historical basis, and no, because I think the entire Belt and Road Initiative at this point in time, it moves away as the old Silk Road, whether it is Maritime Silk Road or Overland Silk Road or the Silk Road economic belt. So it is a departure from the older routes. The older route they came to, they ceased to exist by 1840. That is the first Opium War. And of course, some analysts, they may say that the new BRI, it will reinforce the old Sinosphere. But I think the possibility of reinforcing or implementing that kind of Sinosphere, so it will not happen. As far as India is concerned, so my Chinese friends, so they always say that no, India has not participated in the Belt and Road Forum in May this year, and that's why India is out of the ambit of Belt and Road Initiative. But I say that India is very much on the board, even if we have expressed our territorial concerns. To be very frank, and it is in public domain, it is as regards the CPAC. But we are on board as far as BRI is concerned, and we are part of the BCIM, which is one of the economic corridors in BBBRI plan of things. Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar, Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar economic corridor. And if we see the progress being made since its inception, of course it came into being in 2013 only, but the discussions, if we take back them to Kunming Initiative in 1919, then there are a lot of considerable progress has been made. And for your information, the contracted value of projects by China and India, at this point in time, it is $63 billion US. And more than 500 Chinese companies, so they have registered their offices in India. And Delhi alone has more than 300 Chinese companies. And of course, India has not officially said, we would join, but I think India has no problem to join China's BRI program on selective basis or case-by-case projects. There are a lot of investment taking place in India. I'll give only just a small example of smartphone market being captured and how the European and American companies, they have been ousted by the Chinese telecom companies in India. Today, 55% of the market share has been captured by the Chinese companies in India. You name it, and you will find it there. Vivo, Oppo, Xiaomi, OnePlus, Huawei, ZTE, so on and so forth. So 55% of the Indian telecom market has been captured by 80% of India's energy market today is dependent on China. From small component to furnaces. 80% of the pharmaceuticals, so they come from, raw material, it comes from China. So I think there is no question why India is not on board. If you name it BRI project, this is okay. If you don't name it, I don't think it will make any difference. Maybe there is a component of US in the BRI, and as far as India is concerned, it is trying to balance between India and China. And some of my Chinese friends, so they say that it's trying to be a swing power, between United States and China. I think as far as I'm concerned, I see it as a swing power, balancing between its security interest and economic interest. Thank you very much.